In 1957, Frank Lloyd Wright, known as a creative master in American architecture, gave a speech in the Fine Arts Building of the 1893 Columbian Exposition in Chicago. In his speech, Mr. Wright discusses what is the meaning of the word architect, what is architecture, how did the Beaux-Arts affect American architecture, and how did the Praire movement evolve as American architecture started. The following are an excerpt from the original speech. Before we begin, make sure that you are subscribed to our channel for more content like this. And now, let us investigate the meaning of the word architect. Can somebody tell me what is the meaning of the word architect really is? I've asked so many young people and always got no for an answer. Well, it's strange that you should wear the name architect all of your life and never know what the word means, isn't it? Now, is there anybody here who can give the meaning of the word architect? Well, the word arch, the archbishop, arch means the top. It means way up above everything, really a master. Now, what does tech means? You know that, technician, technology, it means know-how. Knowing the way and the means. Tech, architect. There you have the master of the know-how. What is architecture? What does architecture mean to you? An architect builds buildings, doesn't he? He is supposed to know why he builds those buildings. He is supposed to do something in the design and construction of those buildings that makes them eloquent of their purpose, that makes them features of their site, so that they grace it and do not disgrace it. In other words, it's a great mother art, architecture. And for 500 years, architecture has been more or less a cliché, more or less an exterior, not true to conditions, not true to life. Beaux-Arts. All of the architecture that we knew anything about in America, where the architect had come from, was a Beaux-Arts graduate, and therefore he was inoculated with the major axes and the temple forms and the columns and all that. But somehow that didn't square in my mind or in the mind of Louise H. Sullivan, in the minds of Dankmar Adler and a few other people at the time. With this Declaration of Independence, we had declared something new in the world, and that was the sovereignty of the individual, and that was a very brave thing in government to do. If we were going to go on building buildings in the old way where monarchic dominated, they were all the product of authority. None of them were the children or expression of freedom. Freedom of spirit, freedom of soul. So, we were up against, as I saw it, with a necessity for a culture of our own, an expression of our own, worthy of the greatest gifts of ground the world has ever seen anywhere. Most beautiful, most extensive, beyond imagination. No nation ever inherited such a material wealth as we inherited. So what to do with it? We had no means of doing anything with it except as we tried to make over or in some way modify these old patterns of an old life and an old civilization not at all like ours. So, something had to be born in a new spirit, the new architecture expression. How are we going to satisfy the conditions of this new life? Here is the machine. The machine began imitating in architecture those things which had been done by hand. Well, they soon looked pretty dead and pretty tough and not worthy of man's time. So, someone had to devise ways and means of building whereby the machine could render even more beautifully than ever before the nature of the material, the nature of the steel. We didn't understand anything until we began to dig in and find out what the nature of these things really amounted architecturally. How to express wood as wood. Now, of course, wood is the tree, the greatest friend of a man. He feels it too. Stone is under his feet, the ribs of the earth he inhabits. And here comes glass as an entirely new material to keep air out. And all these new things lying there that the Greeks never knew anything about. I'm sure that if the Greeks had known these materials that we've discovered, we would be copying the Greeks now. we wouldn't be building anything but Greek buildings. We've had to fight integrity that was lacking in the Beaux-Arts performance. It was lacking in the kind of building that we are in here now. And we had to come out with something that had a fresh new expression of contents, at least if not integrity, of feature, and we went in that direction. Studied it, worked hard at, came out with certain simple forms that belong to the prayer here. The prayer and individuality. That's a feature of architecture. The thing has to belong there where it stands, as much of it as possible. It has to be true to the materials of which it is built, which may be what? Steel and glass largely now, and also various other things. For the first time, we began to build according to a human scale. The old grandomania, as you know, took into effect only giving humanity an inferiority complex. That was the aim, of course, and the result of the old Gothic architecture was much the same. Make a man feel small, and he was small in these days. The individual didn't amount to much, but now all of this has changed. Here in America, the individual did amount a great deal. So we took the scale of the human being as the new scale. You've got the properties of steel. A property used in construction is the stand like the spider spinning. Steel can give indefinite span, indefinite lightness of span. And here comes glass to use and large open surfaces filling these spans lightly, and there you had an architecture that the Greeks knew nothing about. Goth knew nothing about. In fact, the Goths tried for this delicacy and width and span and everything by way of stone until the stone began to fall down, until the buildings began to fall. They carried it as far as it could be carried. The first American architects did not know much about steel and its properties. They reduced it to a facade, and all you had to do with a facade after you got it was to devise some type of wallpaper pattern for the face of it and hang in there or plaster it on. So the architect became a facade mummer and a paper hanger more or less on a steel frame. Now, all the elemental things are inherent in the nature of architecture today, and only as you study nature. And nature doesn't mean horses and cows and streams and storms only. That's only one little element. Nature means the essential significant life of the thing, whatever the thing is. I prefer to say that nature is the only body of God that we shall ever see. If we wish to know the truth concerning anything, we will find it in the nature of that thing. So today, we are pretty well in advance of nearly everything this way of the flesh. Concrete becomes the flesh of our modern world, and steel becomes the fibrous integument in the flesh, just as it is in you, as it is in the tree. And now we build as nature builds, from the inside out. We no longer think of building frames such as you see all over the city, in cities such as the United States, and then trying to do something with exterior to make them attractive facades. The mother art is architecture. Without an architecture of our own, we have no soul of our own civilization. Now, of course, architecture is a blind spot of our life in America today. How many millions of students go to university to be educated? They come away conditioned, not enlightened, and they know nothing about architecture. Now that we have reached the end of this video, and if you would like to investigate the entire book, you can find the link to this book down in the description. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video, and we will see you in the next one.